Dr. Mike Okpara, popularly known as MI Power, whose time of overseeing the Eastern region was marked by significant developments and progress. Part of what we will try to do today is discuss his transformative leadership style, showcase using examples, the elements of his development-focused governance and strategy, underscore the importance of inclusive governance that involves grassroots mobilization and citizens' participation in urban and development and planning and the implementation of such strategies. And then lastly, to distill his framework and philosophy, particularly how today's nation that is desperately in need of direction, desperately in need of models for governance, drive a vision, mobilize the people around the vision, and get the results, that justify the resources that the nation is blessed with. Today's panel is quite a very illustrious one. I would introduce all the panelists by name, and then hopefully we can kick off the conversation with them. Particularly just giving them a few minutes to talk about how they're connected with MI Okpara, and then we'll start up the conversation. So today's panel will have 4 persons. We'll have Senator Liyel, Imoke, the former governor of Cross River State. We'll have Professor Anya, the former Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. We'll have Dr. Chi-Chi Aniagolu, the Country Director of TechnoServe. And then we'll have Dr. Patrick, popularly known as Paddy Davies, a senior member of St. Anthony's College, University of Oxford. I bid a warm welcome to the panelists, and I would want to just open the conversation and get us going for the day. So please, can the panelists say hi to our audience and to everybody that's joining the conversation, please?
Good evening from the UK. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You might just say your name so that they can identify you with your face.
I'm Dr. Paddy Davies, Dr. Patrick Davies officially, but Paddy Davies is the broadcasting name, used to be.
Good evening, sir. It's a pleasure to have you on the panel today, and we look forward to the conversation. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much indeed.
Good evening. This is Liyel Imoke. Thank you for having us. Thank you for inviting me.
Good evening, sir. Good to see you, and thank you for joining the panel today. We're happy to have you on the panel. So we look forward. While we wait for the other panelists, I don't know if Dr. Anya and Professor Anya and Dr. Chi-Chi are on, but I think we can kick off the conversation already with the members of the panel that are available. So I'm throwing this question out to you, Senator Imoke, and then to Dr. Paddy Davies. What would you think? What would you say were the primary developmental philosophies of Dr. Mike Okpara? We'll start off with you, Senator Imoke, and then we'll come to Dr. Davies.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for having me on this webinar. And thank you indeed for the good work that Eddie Kazo and all of you are doing at the foundation. I think that is very critical, both for historical reasons, but also to actually bring to the fore the wonderful man, Dr. MI Okpara. This effort, I think, is very timely, not just timely, but also it's an effort that is important for national development. And so I want to acknowledge that fact in the first instance. It's a privilege to be part of this and to speak about MI Okpara, or MI Power, as he was known politically. I'll talk about, like you said, what I believe were his developmental focus as indeed premier. We have to acknowledge the fact that before MI Okpara became premier of the Eastern region, he was first minister. He was a minister. Of course, he was a parliamentarian. He was elected to parliament as early as 1951. And so he was a minister and was in cabinet for several years. In those years, while he was in cabinet, he served as Minister of Health, and he also served as the minister in charge of the Eastern Nigerian Development Agency board at the time, the ENDC. And I think that was what really projected him to a point where he enjoyed the confidence of the then Premier, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, and ultimately became the Premier to succeed Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. It is through those years that I believe that Dr. Okpara cut his teeth and understood the challenges of the region. And in understanding the challenges of the region, he was able to immediately take action as premier when he became premier. He clearly was focused on development, but not just development. He had a development plan. Development planning was critical for his administration, and it was grassroots driven. It was a model that was bottoms up, and his basic focus as premier was to ensure the implementation of that development plan. And each of his development plans, you know what I mean, had a tenure, a time frame, with a very aggressive focus on rural development, very aggressive focus on agriculture, very aggressive focus on industrialization. And if you look at those development plans, you understand how holistic they were. His development plans were extremely holistic. All sectors were captured. And so the impact of government was felt from the bottom up. So it was felt at the grassroots, and it was felt, of course, in the urban areas. And I think that was really the model that actually was used and has been applied in other countries that have made significant progress. Unfortunately, this development plan was interrupted by the Civil War. I believe that if that Civil War had not not happened, Dr. Okpara's vision for the Eastern region would have been realized. So I think we need to go back as a nation to look at those development plans, look at how they were implemented, look at his focus as premier, and the impact it had on the people. You know, they were measurable. You know, and people talk about KPIs today. Dr. Okpara had KPIs, you know, 50, 60 years ago. And that was the most fascinating thing about him. That's why a lot of people think that he was indeed ahead of his time. So we can go on talking about the justice development agenda as it impacts on the Eastern region, but I'll stop here, and I'm sure I'll have other opportunities to expatiate on this.
Thank you so very, very much. Thank you. Dr. Davies, before I jump to you, I see that the other panelists are on. So let me just give them a chance to say hi to everybody. Professor Anya and Dr. Chi-Chi, please say, if you can, just say a quick hi to everybody so we can continue the conversation on Ochichi Obodo, grassroots governance, the MI Okpara template.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I didn't realize that I still had this background. Okay, I'll have to take that down. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Chi-Chi. Good to have you on the panel. Professor Anya, please.
You have freedom to go to church, you have freedom to organize activities at
Professor Anya, if you can hear me, just a quick hi to everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we
can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Well, congratulations.
Sorry, could we crave the indulgence of those who are not talking
The
immediately
people
to
who
maybe mute
started
their
the Center
mics?
for Memory that
so
history will justify. Seems to be some background noise. Liyel has sketched out much of what you will call the legacies, as well as the philosophy that led Okpara to do the things he did. But with hindsight, it is clear that Okpara was far ahead of his time, probably 40 years ahead of his time. The principles he applied in his political management and his economic management are the principles that ultimately has been followed by Malaysia, by Singapore, and by China. But of course, people will say the war was what stopped, he's finishing what he started. But I think that is actually to understate the underscore the situation. Basically, he applied 3 principles. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you, Prof. Yes, we can hear you, okay. Prof.
Yeah. First, he believed in education. Indeed, people say Zik built the University of Nigeria, but that is in fact half the truth. Because Okpara had resources carefully, that's why the money for it, you have to give, the idea was Azikiwe's, but the implementation was Okpara's. He's never been given full credit for that. But beyond the university is also those times, you'll find that he was the only one that spent up to 40% of the budget on education, which was why you had the explosion in education in terms of the institutions, in terms of the numbers during his period. Every community was encouraged with a matching grant to build secondary schools. Then you go to the area of industrialization. The year 1963 is a year that we should never forget. From January to December, one industrial project after another, tire factory, the presidential hotel, the Enugu presidential hotel, Emene, the gas, everywhere. And the third thing, apart from education and industrialization, his human management was exceptional. They call him MI power, but he ceded power to other operators in order to make for efficiency, for experience, and while he coordinates. Let me illustrate what I mean. For example, the management of the day-to-day affairs of the political party, NCNC, he ceded to his friend G. Simbanugo. He was in charge of the party. The issue of managing the intelligentsia, he ceded to Professor Kalezera. The issue of managing the civil service, yes, there was a head of the civil service, but Sam Oti, a permanent secretary, was the one who did the background coordination and making sure that what he wanted done by the civil service was done. And when he came to how to manage finances and so, of course, he had the Ojukwu, the senior Ojukwu, as his major advisor. Whenever he got those people together, know that something new was going to happen because they moved together. Then beyond that was that to make sure that whatever plans he had came from the people. He had a series of consultation mechanisms that particularly the leaders. Yes, what did you say?
Prof, can I pause you there? You're kind of jumping into the next topic. So let me take Dr. Davies's input on the philosophies and legacy, and then I'll come back to you and we start off his broad-based approach to governance. And then maybe you can pick up these thoughts from there, please, if you don't mind.
As you will.
Is that okay with you, Prof?
You are the moderator.
Thank you very much. Dr. Davies, so thank you, Prof. Dr. Davies, let's hear your thoughts on MI Okpara's developmental legacies and philosophy. Dr. Davies, can you hear us? Your mic is probably muted.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Your quick thoughts on his developmental policies and philosophies, his legacy and philosophies, please.
The overarching philosophy for MI was inclusivity. He knew where the developmental goals were in the former Eastern Nigeria. And we shouldn't forget that at this time, we didn't have the concept of states. We had divisions, districts, and provinces. There was Calabar province, or Goja province, and so on and so forth. And within these provinces, the grassroots were divided into communities and so on. The chiefs had their parts to play and the different community groups. So this was the essence of working with the grassroots. He believed in a level playing ground. He believed in making sure that, for instance, education was something he took very seriously and had to be level at all levels. And Calabar was supposed to be the tourism center for Eastern Nigeria. Enugu was the administrative headquarters. Port Harcourt was the industrial center. And he believed that by harnessing this from their different perspectives, everyone would develop and grow together. I regard myself as an objective correlative in this matter. I was born in Obodo, but grew up in Enugu. At that time, and when I finished boarding school, I joined my broadcasting service with the ENBC TV. Nobody thought you had come from one, I don't like to use the word tribe because I think it's detrimental to our development, from one section of the East to another to work. And there was crisscross movement. People who moved from Imo, Abia, into Calabar, into Goja, into Obodo to work. So everybody worked together. The aim was common, accessible development for the benefit of Eastern Nigeria. He knew where the goals were. He knew what the thrust was, and he knew exactly how to use them and interpret them for the benefit of all concerned.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Davies. Before I come back to Professor Anya on the issue of inclusivity, let me just quickly pass on to Dr. Chi-Chi Aniagolu. We've heard about the legacy, we've heard about the philosophy, how he was aggressive, holistic, timed, how he had a big picture and was driven by the philosophies of inclusivity, education, industrialization, and human management. Dr. Chi-Chi, in your opinion, how do you think all of that begins to compare in the light of today's realities, particularly given the level of disharmony currently being experienced in the states that made up the former Eastern region?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question, the last part of it.
Okay, so the question is, how do you think that legacy, sits in the light of today's realities, in what used to be the Eastern region? The philosophy and legacy of has been espoused by the other panelists. How does that sit in today's reality in the Eastern region, and also given the level of disharmony that also currently exists among the states that made up that former region?
Okay, well, I think for me, first of all, we have to recognize the fact that the times are very different. He became premier at a time when Nigeria had just come out of independence. And that nationalistic spirit was there, the spirit of the can-do spirit. People wanted to prove that that independence was possible, because the British had not wanted to give Nigeria independence as a result of and the narrative was that we couldn't rule ourselves. So there was that desire to prove that we could rule ourselves, that we could do this. Another advantage I think that he had at the time was also that we had the regional autonomy. So it was possible to create and do the things that you wanted to, just because the structure allowed you to do it. And so there was also that healthy competition between the regions. He talked about the fact that the East was known for education and healthcare, but needed to go into industrialization. I guess in competition with the Southwest that had become more industrialized at the time. So it was a different time. But that's not to say that we couldn't, that we don't have anything to learn from it. I think the challenge that we have today is that, first of all, the democracy that we had today, a lot of people didn't believe it was going to happen. A lot of people didn't believe that the military was actually going to hand over. And so the quality of leaders that we got, in 1999 at the first, especially in the Southeast, left a lot to be desired. At that point, not everybody, I mean, we had some states that were lucky, but overall, the quality wasn't as high as it could be, precisely because people were skeptical. Even the people who were doing the Nadeko and the rest of it did not believe that the military was going to hand it over. So it was basically left to people who had nothing to lose, who were then the ones who got into politics. And I think that really changed the landscape for the Southeast, for that, in this dispensation that we are in. And so because of the quality and because of the type of system that we had, this federal system that is not a federal system, that was really a unitary system, it becomes a lot more difficult. The structure itself, almost makes it impossible to achieve anything. It's an expensive structure, it's a cumbersome structure. And then it's being done by people who do not have the same patriotism, the same collective desire to transform the society and to transform their region in the way that Okpara had at the time that he did. So I will just conclude by saying that the quality of leadership is a major problem today, that the structure, which is why I am glad that the clamor for restructuring is getting louder and louder, because even people with the best of intentions, will have difficulty achieving much under the type of structure that we have today. So the call for restructuring is completely in order. So I think that, yeah, with the type of leadership, with the structure, and with the fact that we also have a population that has become, really, that has exploded. I mean, if we think about how many people we had in 1960, in England, there were 60 million people in England. Today, there are 65 million people in England. And so the population has only grown by 5 million. In 1960, we had 60 million people. Today, we have 200 million people. So just being able to provide for this number, and of course, that also goes back to the leadership that was unable to provide, that did not have the foresight and the rest of it. And of course, the military interruptions that we kept having, and the fact that mediocrity, and not excellence seems to be the major, way of progressing in Nigeria, unfortunately. So we don't have a system of merit, a meritocratic system, a system that allows the best to be thrown up. And all these things make it really difficult and show why we're still looking with nostalgia at the Okpara period, when we should really be looking at it just as history. Unfortunately, a lot has changed for us for the negative. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Chi-Chi. Yeah, I think the idea basically is to know where the rain started beating us, like Dr. Anya said in one of his pieces. That being said, I would want to come back to Dr. Anya. We have about 13 more minutes before we throw the floor open for audience participation. So, and we have 2 or 3 issues to deal with before then. We would talk about how inclusive and, the theme of today's conversation is Ochichi Obodo, that is grassroots governance, So we'll discuss how the inclusive approach was vital in the success of MI Power's governance, and how he was able to secure a broad base, to implement the development agenda that he had for the Eastern region at that time. Professor Anya, I would leave the conversation up to you. After that, we would then take Senator Imoke and then Dr. Davies, please. Professor Anya, over to you.
Well, I had made the point earlier. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yes, Prof, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I had made the point earlier that he had what you may call the arrowheads for his programs in the kind of people he chose. And merit was important to him. But the most important aspect was the fact that he never really pursued any project until he had built up a consensus around that to the village level, so that the people he was planning for accepted that this project is our own. It meant that his political system went right from the grassroots to the provincial level before it got to the state level. And he had ready-made mobilizers at the local level that he can call and they meet, and he has, from there he gets the pulse of the people. So his government was for the people. It's not like where it is today. As I had said in a recent lecture, the greatest challenge in Nigeria today is the chasm that exists between the governed and the governors. For the Okpara, the government was the servant of the people. And what the people wanted was what he intended to do. More importantly, if there was opposition, he then went through a process of re-education till the community said, yes, we want that project. That is why anything that he developed could stand. After all, some of the roads in the Eastern Nigeria were the roads he built nearly 60 years ago. The more modern ones we think we have, they are collapsing every other day. How did he do it?
Thank you very much.
I don't want
Prof.
to take more time than I,
Okay. I appreciate that. Senator Imoke, please, would you want to share your thoughts on, his bottom-top approach to governance and development during that period?
Yes, thank you very much. I think I'll share a couple of real experiences, as it were. I look at his healthcare programs and his healthcare policies at the grassroots level. You know, being a doctor, he was also trained at the same institution as my father. And they had generally the same ideas about rural healthcare, primary healthcare, as it were. And he wrote the manifesto of the NCNC, that's Okpara. He wrote the manifesto of the NCNC on healthcare, and his focus was on grassroots healthcare delivery. It wasn't on the larger institutions which came later, but ensuring that people in the rural communities had access to healthcare. Eradication of guinea worm and other diseases was critical to development, and he understood that as a medical doctor. So his emphasis, for instance, in healthcare delivery was basically primary healthcare. But in achieving that at the time, I know that the Eja Memorial Hospital, which was founded in Itigiri, came through a process where Okpara himself commissioned the facility, having provided a grant in aid of £10,000 from the Eastern Regional Government to ensure that these facilities in rural communities start up delivering efficiently to the rural communities. And this wasn't the only institution that was funded that way by the Eastern Regional Government, or supported by Eastern Regional Government. And Okpara also came back and did the same thing. He came from that background and went back. And that's just healthcare delivery. That's just one example of his grassroots-based developmental policies. And they were effective. I'd also like to talk about the farm settlements. These were phenomenal. I think today we have something called the Songhai Farm, which is a model that basically replicates the vision for farm settlements. And those farm settlements still exist today. Okpara's administration, it was a continuation from Zig's administration. But the phenomenal thing, because he continued with Zig's programs and policies, the phenomenal thing is that today, 50, 60 years later, okay, the impact of his grassroots focus is still being felt in these communities. The Boki farm settlement, for instance, still exists. The oil palm estates that were developed at the time still exist. For instance, the Kalaro estates and a couple of estates that he was instrumental to developing, as it were, as premier, still exist, and had the privilege of revamping those estates by bringing in private sector. So those investments that were made are still yielding returns for these communities. So we have thousands of people currently still employed in these various farms and these various plantations across the country, especially across the eastern region. So you can see that vision, as Professor Anya said, was way ahead of its time, because we can see clearly that the impact of those decisions that were taken was what actually led to what we now have, or can claim is the beginning of our development. Yes, we've run into challenges since, but I think those are models that we can go back to and still use. They're still usable and implementable today. One more thing I'd like to say is that we mustn't forget that there was a parliamentary system of government at the time. And that made a big difference, because they were all elected. Okpara was elected from his constituency. And so when it came to driving policy down to the grassroots, as Professor Anya has said, getting the people to accept your policies and your programs, you were first their representative in parliament before you became either premier or minister. And that was a critical part of getting the people, those who were elected, to return to their people. That has changed significantly today. And that is why, for some of us, we believe very strongly that we need to review our constitution, not just on the basis of restructuring, but the form of government. Let's go back to the foundation, where we take government back to the people. And that was basically his vision. And I think that should lead us, if we can implement it, to a better tomorrow for not just the Eastern region, but for the entire country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Imoke. Taking government and governance back to people. That's a big ask for today's reality. Let me go to Dr. Davies to share his thoughts on this approach of building a broad-based support for the implementation of Dr. Mike Okpara's vision and agenda. Coming at a time when you did not have that many educated people and not much resources available to him. What do you think was the sterling part of achieving that broad-based support, during that time?
Well, Dr. Anya mentioned earlier about Dr. Okpara having a circle of very close people that he met before he started dispersing his ideas. I know that Dr. G.C. Mbanugo, as he mentioned, was one of them. He's my father-in-law. And I could understand the seriousness with which they took governance at the time. People talk about presidential hotels in Enugu and Port Harcourt, but they don't know the other aspects that sprang from there. All the administrative headquarters, we could call them divisions at the time, because I said there were no states at the time. We governed on the basis of provinces and districts or divisions. Like in Obodo, we had the government guest house, which was running and in fact has now been privatized. We forget something like the Obodo boat yard, and the platform for exporting oil, palm oil abroad. Crude oil wasn't an aspect at that time, although it was there. It was based in Obodo. And because of it, work was created for the localities of these places. The chiefs were brought into governance. They were made to mobilize their communities. That system of government, even though it was not scripted, became the precursor for the formation of local governments that exist today. So there are quite a number of, history does not recount a lot of the things that are unspoken and unscripted, that are unspoken or unscripted. But it was the harnessing of work, education, and ethics at the grassroots that then was used for the commonality of the development of the states. Like the Prof said, everybody was elected. Nobody was appointed. Even as a member of the House of Representatives, you owed it to your people to come back and give an account of what you were doing. And giving an account at that local level was important for you to be able to maintain your election prospects and so on. And this was harnessed. And even when Dr. Michael Okpara traveled to areas that were action group and not NCNC, he did not take out the promises he made one from the other. As I said, he believed in a level playing ground. He believed education should be level across the state. He believed that health should be level across the state. And that is why I'm using these personal examples from localities. It is so easy for us to talk about generalities. But
if I may come in there is moderator, there is an aspect of his life we must not forget, his integrity.
Yes.
And I think if you'll allow me, I'll say something about that. Members of his cabinet.
All right.
You say I should go ahead?
Well,
members
Dr.
of his cabinet build palace. Okay.
I can allow Dr. Anya to if it's going to make a point
awesome,
an adjunct to what I was saying.
Awesome.
Please go on.
Prof, please go on.
Moderator.
Prof, go on, sir.
Yep.
Go on, Prof.
Hello. Okay. The point I was making, that his level of personal integrity was out of the ordinary. Members of his cabinet built palaces in their villages. But when Okpara came back home after serving for nearly a decade as the premier of Eastern Nigeria, he returned to the bungalow of his father. And that's important. And for him also, transparency and accountability in government was important. All those foot soldiers for him at the local level, he made sure they had something to do, created by government, either in the farm settlements or some other district, so that whatever came their way, they had to account for it because they're not going to be left out because they were political apparatchiks. This is very different from what we now have. You end, even within the party, what you get. No other political leader in Nigeria at that time had that level of personal integrity. Please go on.
Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Davies. Thank you, Professor Anya.
Yes, so that's again is an adjunct. The total way of life at that time. It was selfless. It was service to the people and absolute selflessness. They did not think of their bank rolls. They did not think of their property. They wanted people to develop at an even level throughout Eastern Nigeria. And there was a thrust towards exports and the propagation of the principles that Eastern Nigeria was working with. Palm oil was the main, palm oil and kernel, and the oil mills were developed in areas that these existed. It was the main products of Eastern Nigeria at the time. The University of Nigeria in Nsukka was built from palm oil products, and so on and so forth. And nobody would believe that that could be achieved at that time. And by the time his government receded, they had put pathways into exporting these things to different places. Malaysia bought palm oil seedling from us. Now we are buying palm oil from Malaysia. Why? If Eastern Nigeria had succeeded in carrying on the principles that MI put in place, that would not have happened, apart from the impediments of the federal government.
Thank you very much, Dr. Davies and Professor Anya again for the thoughts. We would soon, well, almost 5 minutes into the audience time, but I would want to take a quick thought from Dr. Chi-Chi, and then we would throw the floor open to the audience. Please, for all the audience, if you have questions, you can send them either as a message, or you could raise your hand, or you could take a note of them and then raise your hand when we open the floor for conversation. Dr. Chi-Chi, please, if you can, in a quick minute or two, given the ideas that have been shared around mobilization, grassroots inclusivity, and building a support base, why is it a challenge in today's world, to get citizens involved in governance as we had in those days? Your thoughts, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I think that there's a lot. The reasons are quite a lot. First of all, to start with, at the return to democracy, a lot of the elections were marred with violence. And it looked like more of a winner take all than trying to get citizens to participate in governance. That automatically got a lot of people disinterested in politics. People who just wanted to go and vote to realize that their lives would be at risk if they did it. And so that overwhelming desire for people to return to democracy, to participate in a democratic government was immediately dissipated. And so the violence was one major thing. I think another thing is the fact that a lot of people, apathy set in because people did not see their will, being represented in democracy. And so the people that people felt should have won didn't win. The process just became, more of a thuggish representation. And so most regular people, which is majority of people, just decided they didn't want to be a part of it. And also on the part of the politicians, there was really not much of a need to mobilize the people. As Dr. Paddy was saying, the leaders at the time were completely selfless. I think that the leaders at this time, and I don't want to generalize for everybody because there are always exceptions, but I think that for majority of the leaders today, the motivation for politics is completely and totally selfish. And so there is no need to mobilize the people. You just need to mobilize what is required for you to win elections. That includes, inducing the electoral system, starting from the internal politics that does not exist within the party, and all the way now to the Supreme Court. And so there is really no desire for grassroots mobilization. And it's not even to the interest of the politician to do that, because if you are that popular with the people, then you will have to serve them. And so it's actually of no use to you if your desire is not to serve the people. Why mobilize them in the first place? So I think also the fact that, again, like what I mentioned, the fact that there's that the quality of the leadership is such that, it's not about service. So if we put all these things together and also think of the fact that, Nigeria's economy is dwindling, the situation is getting worse, the people themselves, having seen that politics isn't going to work for them, just want what they can get from the politician. And so it's also now from the demand side, from the citizen side, people are no longer demanding good governance. People just want politicians to come and give them something. And so that makes also mobilization extremely difficult. So those who really want to engage with politics, who really want to engage with their leaders, are really very much in the minority. So it's on both sides, both from the side of the leadership and the side of the citizens. The system has collapsed, and that's what the major challenge is.
All right, thank you so very much, Dr. Chi-Chi, Dr. Anya, Dr. Davies, Professor Anya, and Senator Imoke. We will throw the floor open for another 10 minutes. If there are questions, please post them on the group. If you also want to direct it at somebody specifically, kindly indicate that so that it could be, directed to them. Otherwise, you could also raise up your hand and we will try and give you the floor for your very quick question. Thank you. I think there's already a question in the chat. Let me read it out. Jude Anya says, even though we practice a different type of system, how can we propagate the MI power model such that present-day citizens will be informed and demand this from their politicians? That's the one question I can see. And there, admin, you could help us. I see Eze Akanobi has his hand raised, so maybe we could unmute him so we could take his question, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, the moderators and the discussants. I'm very happy to listen to all the things you have said. The one that touches me most was the one that said by Chi-Chi right now, that the politicians has realized there's no need to mobilize the people, but to mobilize the resources to win an election. That is the bane of our society. That's where we are. And that's the terrible set of situation we are. A democracy that doesn't involve the people, a democracy that doesn't care about what the people think. To me, people still believe that we are in democracy, but I don't know. I'm no longer believing that we are in democracy, because when people no longer contribute to who become their leaders, when political officers can stay in the comfort of their zone and decide who become aspirants, we are strong participants are disqualified for a particular candidate to emerge. That is not the democracy. That system cannot create a servant relationship. It's only create a lord that will see themselves as doing their own business, while we at the lower level will be like spectators. So that is unfortunate. I thank the leadership, the organizer for this forum, and I pray that they should take this into grassroots where it matters most. Taking this Anambra election in perspective, so people will realize.
I might have to stop you very soon. If you have a question, could you put the question? Thank you very much, Ezakanubi. Thank you very much. Do we have another hand raised? Do we have another question from the audience, from the participant? There are questions in the chat box. Let me read those out. Michael Udebu says, what can be done to put back Eastern Nigeria to the development strides that achieved under Dr. M.I. Okpara's time? And then can we not push development in Eastern Nigeria without the government? That's a question from Michael Udebu. Fab Maida says, I totally support the call for restructuring of the country. If this does not happen in the near future, what other ways can we replicate the successes of M.I. Okpara? Anya says, what was it about M.I. Okpara that meant he had the vision and motivation to deliver? How do we develop such people today? Onyeka Ubiozna says, what can we as a people do to leave that stance of just admiring M.I., but also acting like he had done? Very valid question. I think all of this thoroughly capture the essence of the conversation that has been had so far. Okay, there are other questions in the chat box. I will read these ones out and we'll come back to the panel. Anya says, looking at Dr. Okpara's era and our circumstances today, do the panelists have any thoughts on the role of an enlightened electorate in the selection of the leaders and the accountability of those they govern? Juliet Kego says, how do we begin afresh and build from the ground up and mainstream Dr. Okpara's personal values, leadership model, and economic philosophies in our educational curriculum? How can the Center for Memories and Igbo Intelligentsia build on these sessions and create sustainable structures and institutions? Anya says, Professor Anya and Dr. Davies commented about the importance of integrity. How did he do this? Did he have the political will to remove associates who were corrupt? Are there any examples? Thank you, audience. Okay, wow, questions are still streaming in. I don't know if we can keep up with this. Thank you very much for all the questions. I think let me turn this back over to the panelists. We are almost out of time, so I am under compulsion now to hand over this meeting to the host. But let me turn this over to the panelists. Maybe in answering the questions, Juliet, I see your hands up, but we're pressed for time. My apologies, please. I think I've read one of your questions, so I may not be able to take your hand up. Let me turn this back over to the panelists. In trying to address the question, you also, if you have any final thoughts, please let's have them at once. So let me start with Professor Anya. Prof, let's have your thoughts on some of the questions that have been raised, if you want to take on any of them, and then your concluding thoughts as well, because I don't know if I will have the time to come back to all the panelists individually. Professor Anya, please.
Now, yes. First of all, you do not expect those who have created a problem to be the ones to solve it. The particular political system we run now the desecration of values and the promotion of self above everything else that we have now was not there before. Certainly not in Okpara's time. So what do? My belief is that there must be a paradigm shift in terms of values. The values that are running up and can lead us nowhere. Indeed, it has already led us to near cataclysm. So there must be a change in that regard of the kind of people who come into politics, of the values that they espouse. Indeed, some of us have already started doing something about it, because these people who infest our politics now are incapable of solving the kind of serious problems they've created in Nigeria. I had to leave a meeting, a webinar that is on, that I was supposed to chair today, going on in Abuja as we speak. The Nigerian Prize for Leadership is a new initiative that some elders, like myself, Chris Kolade, and so on, have started producing and orienting the successor generation of Nigerians. And we are putting them through new courses where they will learn what values are, what the things that in the experience of other countries, how they've done things and so on. And the need for sacrifice as the basis for service. That is going on now. Last year, we produced 57 of them. This year, I don't know how many. We must start the process of recruiting and teaching and getting new leaders to take over our system. Otherwise, where we will end up, well, Somalia may be, maybe in comparison a heaven compared with what is staring us in the face right now. I think that what I will say in relation to leadership, a complete change needs to be done.
Thank you very much, Professor Anya. Let me come to Dr. Davies. Your response to some of the questions and your concluding thoughts. Like I said again, we're pressed for time, and I really wouldn't be able to do a round of with the panelists. My apologies for rushing you, please. Dr. Davies.
Yes, the physical geography of Eastern Nigeria has not changed. What has changed are the human beings within that physical geography. We have said that governance begins with the grassroots to be even. The grassroots still have that power. It is for those who need change to go back to the grassroots, not to militarize them, but to educate them politically, to take the quiet and silent power that they have in their hands. If the grassroots tell those who are leading them to stop being their leaders, they'll have nowhere to go. The thing is that we are too busy in Eastern Nigeria now building walls. We need to tear those walls down and reach out across the communities. That's my conclusion.
Thank you very, very much. They need to tear down the walls and build new communities. It's deeply appreciated. Let me take Dr. Chi-Chi, and then we would end up with Senator Imoke. Dr. Chi-Chi, your closing thoughts and perhaps one or two responses to the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I want to answer the question on, what could be done to put back Eastern Nigeria and the development strides achieved in Dr. Emma Okpara's true. Can we not push development in Eastern Nigeria without the government? I'd like to say that, first of all, Eastern Nigeria has done excellently well without government in terms of the self-help. Many communities have built up their communities, many healthcare centers and schools and the rest of them are actually built by the people from that community. So we're a people who have really not experienced a lot of government. That said, I think that that is actually part of our albatross. I think that, you know, we have developed in spite of our government, and most people in the world develop because of their government. And we have continued to allow the government to have their way because we feel, oh, let's do it ourselves. So I think that I totally agree with Dr. Davis that we need to go and become more politicized at the grassroots level. And we also have seen the economic strides that Igbos have made all over Nigeria. Why is that not happening in Eastern Nigeria? Because the government is actually an obstruction. So I think that a way to begin to engage with the government is to engage with them around the things that we know best, which is business, to ease the way the way of doing business in the Southeast, to make it a lot easier, to force the government to create an enabling environment for business. If we begin to have an economy that grows, then it will release people from demanding, you know, 5 naira and 10 naira from politicians. The richer a place becomes, the more good governance happens, because the people automatically, you know, want better governance because they don't need the handouts that come from government. So I think that something that we can do is to get our business people to begin to look at the Southeast as a place to invest. And to do that, we will need the government to create an enabling environment. And that can become a place in which we can start the push to ensure that the government makes it easy for Easterners to invest in the Southeast. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chi-Chi. Senator Imoke, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. I'd just
Your
like to
concluding thoughts and perhaps responses.
All right, thank you. Just a few quick points based on the questions, in response to the question. The first one I'd like to talk about is participation in political process. What I've found out is that a lot of the elite class speak but do not participate. And you know, if we elect a local government chairman who we know before he was elected was a fish seller, he becomes a chairman and we expect performance from him, then we are failing. I think that it is important and necessary that the elite class in Nigeria, because we're far more educated than it was the case during Okpara's time, the elite class must take the risk, okay, of taking the chance of making sure that we build a better future for the citizens of this country and for our communities. So I would like to encourage participation, more active participation. There's no vacuum in politics. And unless we take the bull by the horn, you know, and there's no classical politician either. So I think that it's important and it's urgent that the work that Professor Anya is doing and that some of us are doing with young people will be escalated. But beyond that, the voices that we have in our communities speak up a lot, but do not participate in the process. And what happens is that there's a vacuum that's filled by charlatans. The second thing I'd like to talk about briefly is the need for us to understand that the Eastern region was made up of what is now 9 states. So what we've done, we've devolved and devolved and devolved. So an economy that could be run with one minister of education, one premier, one minister of health is being run by 9 ministers of education, 9 governors, 9 ministers of health. So you can imagine the bureaucratic fallout, the expenditure, the cost of governance, and the impact that has on development. That is why we must go back to the drawing board. Thirdly, how do you grow an economy in 9 states without them being able to form some economic forum, have some understanding, you know what I mean, that brings them back together? You know, even if you still exist as states, I mean, you must have common platforms for development. And it's only on that basis that you can actually attract the necessary investment into the region. Finally, I'd like to talk about, you know, grassroots participation in our politics. What we have is that we have a complete failure process. That's our reality. And part of that comes from voter education. There's a total lack of understanding, you know, at the grassroots level of what governance is about. You know, governance, you know, seems to be a reward system for thugs now and all sorts of characters. we need people to understand that government is actually to serve them, you know, and that our responsibility is not just to serve them, but that we are only as strong as the weakest link. So no matter how glowing we say we've done well, the truth is that we're only as strong as our weakest communities and our people. So there's a real challenge there on how to get significant participation from the grassroots. And that is why the models that we've implemented, the presidential system that we've implemented, and you know, the unitary system basically that we have in Nigeria cannot really take us to that destination where Amaya Okpara would have loved us to be at. I think those are my concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Imoke. Thank you. I wouldn't make the effort to attempt a summary of all the wonderful ideas that have been shared. But I think the documentary is out, and everybody would benefit from, you know, watching it. I think the ideas that have been shared are fantastic. The conversation has been rich, and Michael Okpara has left us a template that we can use to, you know, forge forward as a people. If nothing else, he has shown us the possibilities in the Eastern region, and it behoves on us to pick up from where he left up and build one that he would smile on from heaven. I would just want to quickly thank the panelists for their conversations. I know they are all very busy people. Thank you for making our time to join this forum, for your ideas. And to everybody in the audience that sent in questions, that participated, thank you very much. And lastly, to the Center for Memories, thank you for organizing this and for bringing us on board to be part of this very wonderful conversation. I would hand over now to Uzomo Okoye, a board member of the Center for Memories, to just share his thoughts from the center and give us a closing remark. Again, thank you, everyone. And
I'm sorry, can I say something? Sorry, before you go, somebody asked the question, Prof, please, where is that Leadership Institute and how does one get admitted? I think it's an important information to share.
The Prof is muted. We can't hear him.
Can't hear Prof.
Prof, can you unmute your mic, please? We can't hear you.
Nothing
Prof,
doing. We still
muted.
can't
Okay,
hear.
excellent.
Okay. I didn't get your last question.
Somebody had asked, where is your Leadership Institute and how can people participate in it?
Well, how do we do it? I can give him the secretariat, the address of the secretariat in Abuja and the executive secretary, and he can then get in touch. For example, today is the beginning of the new crop we've just recruited for this year. So please give the person my phone number and my email, then we communicate and I'll link him up with whoever.
Okay, and I think somebody has posted the website onto the chat as well. I think that there's additional information on there.
Come again.
The Facebook and the website. If you check the chat, I think that will also that's available on the chat at the moment.
Okay.
Okay. So fantastic. My name is Uzomo Okoye. I'm one of the directors for Center for Memories. And it's just my role is a very simple one, just to thank everybody for their participation. This is one of the most impactful ventures that we have done. And to gather, you know, the caliber of people that we have done for today's discussion, I think has been a coup. It's been a fantastic discussion. So I want to thank the Senator Imoke. I want to thank Professor Anya. I want to thank Dr. Chi-Chi, and of course, Dr. Paddy Davies, all of you that have given up your time just to invest into this webinar and to this discussion. Center for Memories is an organization run by a group of well-meaning Nigerians looking at promoting Igbo culture, the very best of Igbo and Eastern culture. One of the things, that's, things like exhibitions at the center in Enugu, just highlighting the very best that we have. And is one of the things that we've been able to do is this like documentary, which shall be screened. I think this is the 6th version that will be screened shortly. And Ihoma has already circulated the link for the YouTube where you can go on and watch the actual documentary. So we're self-funded. We're funded by a lot of grants and well-meaning people that value the work that we're doing. Like I say, this documentary has been one of the most impactful things that we have been able to achieve in the time that we have been around. So I want to thank Ed Kiazo for his efforts in producing the documentary. I want to thank everybody that has participated in that documentary. Obviously, again, focusing, I think it's great, the sense of being able to look back at what has worked as a way of moving forward, which has made this discussion all the more important. So thank you very much for everybody that has participated. And I want to thank also Chinedu for moderating the session very effectively. So once again, on behalf of myself, Patrick Okibo, the head of the organization, and everybody who has participated in this and everything going forward, we thank you for your time and hope you will spend the time just to go through. You haven't seen the documentary. It is a very insightful piece of work. So I would urge you to just log into the link and also be able to participate in that. And engage with us. Centerformemories.org is our website. If Ihoma could also type that into the link as well, that would be great. So everybody has access to the work that we are doing going forward. So thank you once again for your participation. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, so I would maybe I'll get if you could maybe paste the link also into the chat so that anybody will be able to link up to that straight into the YouTube. The time is fast spent. I'm sure that she's ready to, there it is there. So anybody, if you click on the link, it will take you directly to the YouTube page. So once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for participating in the discussion, the wealth of wisdom that has come out of these things. And we hope, we'll be able to take some of these learnings moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope to see you all when next time in Nigeria.
I'll be
Yes,
good.
very much.
Professor Anya, I'll probably come to your center when I'm in Abuja.
Bye, everyone.
Hello, bye.
Thank you so much,
Dr.
Chi-Chi.
Chi-Chi. Take care.